Good morning. Back in secondary school, I had a friend. Let's call him Adamu. He was a rich kid. His dad was the CEO of a large multinational, and he came to school at the beginning of each term in two large Nissan patrols, one to carry him, the other to carry his chop boxes. Yes, I said chop boxes. Adamu never ate in the dining hall. He never ran out of food either. He would simply send a message home when one of his chop boxes was getting empty, and a fully stocked one would be placed on a Nissan patrol and sent over to him from Accra. Now, most of the time, Adamu was a cool guy. Great company, told funny stories, and wasn't too hesitant to splash some of his money on those he liked. He was also a bit of a snob, though. He wanted nothing to do with those he considered poor or beneath him. You know, poor boys were almost not human to him. He couldn't bear kids from Cape Coast, for example. And he only made an exception for me because, in his words, I wasn't actually from Cape because I'd, again, his words, just dropped from London, which I never quite understood because I had actually come from Wales and not London. But I played along. Why not? The boy's shito had the largest chunks of meat in it. Anyway, life was good for Adamu until in Form 3 his father died and everything changed. Adamu was sent home to be with his family and he didn't come back for the rest of the term. At the start of the next term, Adamu came to school in a taxi. He had just one chop box and a trunk that looked exactly like everyone else's. And the boy looked so embarrassed getting out of the taxi. He spent the next few days giving various excuses for the fact that he didn't arrive in the style to which we had all become accustomed. Adamu still refused to eat in the dining hall, so it wasn't long before his single chop box was empty. No replacement chop box came. His money ran out soon after that. He borrowed some from me, and when that ran out, he borrowed some more. And then he borrowed from others and colleagues and seniors, even the Cape Coast boys he despised. Anyone who had a few cedis to spare him, so he wouldn't have to eat the substandard food served in the dining hall. Soon, Adamu was the most wretched boy in the school. He had sold everything he owned. Soap, toiletries, watches, trainers, designer belts. Even his school uniforms had disappeared, except for one single set. People started to talk about him behind his back. And as his friend, I got into many fights with many people trying to defend him. Little by little, I watched helplessly as my dear friend sank lower and lower. By the end of that term, Adamu was not only eating in the dining hall, he was storing dining hall kinky to eat later. The following term, Adamu did not return to school, and I never saw him again. So why am I telling you this? Well, it's because Ghana has just voted 123 new MPs into Parliament, which means the same number of MPs have been kicked out by the voters. After several years of flying first class, sleeping in 5-star hotels, riding in 4x4 motorcades, eating in the best restaurants, and never letting little things like who is paying the bill ever concern them. That all comes to an abrupt end from now. Now, I saw Adamu struggle, and I know how difficult it is to fall from grace. I mean, you're going to find it very difficult to give up the first-class lifestyle. The people in your family, your community, will all expect you to keep doing the same things you were doing while you were in Parliament. You will keep flying first class. You will keep riding in the back seat of that petrol-guzzling V8. You will keep riding those money-guzzling university girls. You will keep doing all the things you used to do, except that this time, you will be paying for it out of your own pocket. Now, I know how good the ex gratia looks right now, but trust me, if you have been living on our taxes for all these years and you never learned how to generate any of the money you were spending, then even $1 million will eventually run out. And then you will start the slippery slope into wretchedness. Please, my dear friend, don't let this happen to you. Regardless of people's expectations of you, your lifestyle will have to change because your fellow Ghanaians are no longer paying for it. Losing your job is bad enough. Don't lose your self-respect with it. Now, I tell you this because I care about you. You've served in a position of dignity for all this time. The position has ended, but don't let the dignity end with it. My name is Kojo Yankson, and on behalf of Ghana, I thank you all for your service. Good morning, Ghana.
good morning and welcome to the AM News with me, Mapita CBD. Now, President Akufo-Addo has pledged to build upon the foundation developed in his first term to transform Ghana into the country its citizens have always dreamt of. In his inaugural address after being sworn in for his second term, the president assured Ghanaians the renewal of his mandate is a privilege he does not take for granted.
What I have seen these last 4 years is further evidence, if any were needed, that the Ghanaian will no longer accept poverty and deprivation as his or her portion, but is rather determined to work to chart a path of growth and development for himself or herself. Today, our economy, even in the face of the global pandemic of COVID-19, continues to show resilience and a much faster rate of recovery than originally envisaged, and was indeed one of the fastest growing economies in the world in 2020. Ghana remains one of the most attractive destinations on the continent for direct foreign investment, with the presence in the country of some of the world's largest conglomerates attesting to this fact. Establishing a strong economy, undergoing structural transformation to value-added activities, which will generate jobs for our young people and enhance their living standards, will be the main preoccupation of my second term. Together, we're ensuring that the basic tenets of social justice are met. Many said it was beyond us, but we have ensured that financial considerations no longer determine the fate of the Ghanaian child. Because of the implementation of the free senior high school policy, once willing and able, senior high school education is the minimum education to be received by every Ghanaian child. Together, you and I will be chartering new territory in the governance and politics of the Fourth Republic. For this is the first time in the life of this republic that a president from one party will be obliged by the exigencies of the moment and the will of the people to work in all sincerity and cooperation with a Speaker of Parliament from another party. I'm confident that both of us will be guided in our relationship by the supreme interest of our people in ensuring good governance in the ordering of the affairs of state. I want to assure you of my wholehearted determination to work with you to advance the peace, progress, and prosperity of the Ghanaian people.
There was joy and excitement at Sombo in the Nadoili-Kalio district of the Upper West region, where the Speaker of Ghana's 8th Parliament, Alban Bagbin, hails from. Residents are happy that one of their own has been elevated to the 3rd highest office of the land. Joi's Upper West region correspondent Rafiq Salam, who visited the community, reports the people are hopeful his new office will not only lead to the development of the community, but the region as a whole.
Session of Parliament started this morning with the election of Honorable Alban Bagbin as the Speaker of the House. We are right here at Sombo, located in the Nadoili-Kalio district of the Upper West region. There are 2 communities in the Upper West region that bear the name Sombo, Wala Sombo in the Wa municipality and Daga Sombo in the Nadoili-Kalio district. The new Speaker of Parliament, Right Honorable Alban Bagbin, has close relations in the 2 communities. He was born here at Dagasombo to a father who was a farmer and a mother who was a basket weaver. He lived all his 63-year-old life here, except some few years ago when he moved to Walasombo. He used to share this house with his immediate sibling, Pastor Moses Bagbin, but upon the movement of his elder sibling to Walasombo, he is the sole person here, staying with his wife and 8 children and grandchildren. As a minister of God, he didn't go to sleep, but throughout the entire night, prayed for the successful election of his senior sibling. I break my back throughout the night to pray for God to intervene. If the new position will be better for him, may he be elected. Pastor Moses Babin noted that the election of Alban Summana Kinsport Babin as a Speaker of Parliament is a good omen for not only Dagasombo but the entire Upper West region, a view equally shared by an elated nephew of the Speaker, Jonathan Babin.
As an uncle, and then he's elected as the Speaker of Parliament. We are all happy because it's a step that he's putting ahead for us all to follow. Then it's we have to also take up the mantle to also go ahead with whatever he's doing. So it's good for us and it's a good name for the family.
Bartholomew Numbazin is a cousin and a bleeding heart defender of the record of Alban Babin.
For the young ones that are coming up, this shows that you can be from, the lowest background, but you can rise up to the top. That is if you are determined, if you are, committed to what you are seeking for, you will actually get to the ultimate. And that is what is a joy to all of us. Then the other thing is that, things like this definitely has been bringing a lot of development to Sombo. For instance, supporting us, children to go to school, supporting with infrastructure and clinics and whatever.
Majority of the people here, especially the youth, are without jobs. They are hopeful his elevation will change the trend.
Right from the beginning, when he came to assist his PC, he was saying that his wish was, when John Dramani Mahama wins the presidency, he was definitely going to become the Speaker. So there will be 3 heads, who they will all gather hands and bring development to the community. But God still being very grateful. Now we have 2 hands. So in our local language, there's a saying that Kabada yi Suwanga Babora. So with our member of parliament and with him, he can still pull more development as he continued to do in the previous years, and now he's going to do more.
We want job. We don't have job here. We want job. We don't have work here to do. We want plenty work to do. So we are sitting here. You don't see the man. The dumb boys is sitting here. Babin can do it. We know.
Alban Babin's dream, right from his World Secondary School days, where he was among the first batch of students 51 years ago, was to be president of the Republic of Ghana. Bartholomew Numbazin is of the firm belief that that dream has partly been fulfilled.
Because definitely there will be a point that the president may travel, that the vice president will also travel, and it will just fall on him, culture. They will announce him as the president of Ghana. If it is even just 6 hours, that is the joy. And that also shows that even what he was aiming at, contesting as the, the presidential candidate for the NDC, definitely he is going to now combine all, being the speaker and sometimes also taste the presidency.
Reporting for Joy News, Rafiq Salam, Sombo.
Now, perhaps the most dramatic scene that characterized the swearing-in of members of the 8th Parliament is the snatching of some sheets of paper believed to be ballots cast for the election of Speaker by an MP who has found himself in the news a few times already for one controversy or another. 54-year-old Carlos Kingsley Ahinkra is representing the people of Tema West for the 2nd time after he was first elected in 2016. He was until July 2020 the Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry. Here's a chronicle of a few of the notable incidents which have plagued Mr. Ahinkra's last 4 years and today as a legislator.
Carlos Ahinkra, in August 2017, was suspended by the Assembly after he attacked an engineer who was supervising the demolition of unauthorized structures erected on the shoulders of the road in Tema. Then, at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic in Ghana last year, Mr. Ahenkra stepped out to monitor a voter registration exercise by the Electoral Commission in his constituency, as a very interested party will do, except he had tested positive for coronavirus. He, however, had justification for defying doctors' orders to self-isolate.
Tuesday, I decided to just pass through and see how some of the centers were operating.
But at the time, no, you knew your test results, so what tested positive?
Oh yes, of course. But it didn't mean that I couldn't go out.
He was flayed by many Ghanaians who believed he had been grossly irresponsible, and pressure group Occupy Ghana asked the president to sack him. The legislator subsequently resigned from his deputy ministerial position, but that was after reports 3 members of his campaign team had also tested positive for COVID-19, with one of them reportedly losing their life. The woes of Mr. Ahenkra deepened when he was barred from stepping foot in the palace of the Tema Traditional Council. The MP then came under pressure to step down and not contest the December 2020 parliamentary election. He, however, defied the calls and won a second term, and happened to have started that term with yet another controversy. This time, live on national television, he could be seen engaging in a conversation shortly before he made a dash for the papers in front of the Clerk of Parliament and making off with them. He was giving a hot chase, and what happened to be a few fists thrown at him until one of his colleagues came to his rescue. He has refused to explain his reason for his action and comment until Friday.
How are you doing?
I will speak to you tomorrow.
Why did you snatch the ballot paper? Why did you do that?
Tomorrow.
Why did you snatch the ballot paper?
Social media is, however, refusing to let the matter die off, and many are wondering what sanctions are there in store for parliamentary ballot snatchers. Hannah Dami for Joy News.
It was supposed to be a battle of wit and strategy on a night when 2 experienced legislators, one a former boss of the other, were expected to go toe-to-toe in what promised to be a tight race for speakership in Ghana's 8th parliament. Both the National Democratic Congress and New Patriotic Party had claimed to be in the majority, even before the dissolution of the 7th parliament, giving an indication of the drama to expect at the birth of the 8th. Now, the progress of the night's business, however, rested on the shoulders of one man. Manuel Kranting reports on how Cyril Kwabena-Oting-Nsia, who had been Clerk of Parliament for barely 2 years, had to face the toughest test of any of his predecessors in the Fourth Republic.
Oh God, grant us a vision of our country, a country of brotherhood, where all success shall be founded on service, a country of peace, where government shall rest on the will of the people and the love for the common good. Bless the efforts of those who struggle to make this vision a living reality.
Excerpts of the prayer that sets the tone for what will go down in history as perhaps the most unforgettable night in Ghana's parliament. What's more, it was said by the clerk of the House, Cyril Kwabena-Oting-Nsia, who was in for his most challenging task yet since he became clerk in 2019. On the stroke of midnight, the 7th Parliament stood dissolved, and the clerk, also a lawyer by profession, was ready. His job was to superintend over the election of the Speaker.
Pursuant to Standing Order 8.3, I, Cyril Kwabena-Oting-Nsia, Clerk to Parliament, acting as Chairman of the first sitting of Parliament, do invite you to this August sitting today, Thursday, the 7th day of January 2021 at 7 minutes after midnight for the purpose of electing a speaker and administering the oaths of office.
The next 12 hours after this statement would reveal what many have described as the failure of the clerk to keep a leash on the 275 MPs elect, who were clearly divided on who the next Speaker of the House should be. First, a fiery query on whether or not his office had been served the order of the Cape Coast High Court barring Asin North MP-elect James Jachikwesing from being sworn in.
I want to find out from you, Mr. Chair, whether or not you have received a court order in respect of a plaint by Michael Ankuma Nina, which order makes reference to any person on the list as you provided.
This debate over his attempt to deny Mr. Jachikwesing the opportunity to vote would drag for hours, even though it also meant he was every now and then accorded the high office of Speaker.
Service could be served on the Clerk of Parliament, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman. In this argument that is on the floor of Parliament, Mr. Speaker, on this argument that is on the floor of Parliament, if you listen to the argument just raised by Honorable Ayariga, it is in contravention of Article 117. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman.
The pressure on him to make a pronouncement on the way forward was telling. At least, it wasn't lost on Parliament's Director of Public Affairs, Kate Addo, who reached out to rub his back in a bid to calm him. But that was not enough to save him from the night, which was only to get more chaotic and grueling. From vandalizing ballot screens to snatching a ballot box, the MPs will not oblige the signal of his gavel, even with the presence of the army. He will be accused of not being firm enough and blamed for everything that happened on the night by the same MPs who refused to yield to his authority. But in the end, the job was done and history was made. Under the supervision of Cyril Kwabena Otensia, Parliament elected the first member of the opposition to the high office of Speaker.
I have the honor to declare Honorable Alban Kingsford Sumana Bagbin as Speaker-elect.
That's it for the AM News with me, Mapisa CBD. The AM show continues, so stay tuned.
Well, welcome aboard the News Review segment on the AM show. You know how we do it. We're going to be delving into the major papers this morning. Mamavi, good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Ben. How are you?
We day. God day, we day.
Nice. I'm not sure if I've recovered from yesterday or 2 days ago. I mean, it's still, yeah, we're here. We're talking about our democracy, and I'm referring to the scenes in Parliament from, well, late nights, 6th of January and early morning, 7th of January. And I was just looking through the BBC, the page, and I saw that they had featured us. Yeah. You know, they talked about the president being sworn in, but they added the chaos as well.
You know, I mean, let's face it, the Western media, they're often looking for, I'm sorry, but the negative about Africa, which makes me also believe. I mean, I'm not saying that they're always on the lookout for.
As for this one,
for that, but you know, the BBC, the CNN, I mean, all the major portals actually picked it up. But interestingly, at around the same time, what you know, Vice President Pence was describing as the darkest day, or one of the darkest days in American history, was also unfolding at Capitol Hill, which is, I mean, can you think of it? Two countries that are so respected when it comes to democracy, one in the West, the other in West Africa, both of them messing up, you know, just around the same period. I found it rather, you know, curious, but it did happen.
We're playing back some of the shameful scenes from our parliaments, and this is the 8 parliaments, the drama, the chaos, the embarrassing moments. Carlos Ahinkra.
But you know, on a lighter note, I think I never knew Carlos could sprint like that. I never knew he could. I mean, I think if within that short distance you had pegged him with one of the best sprinters around, he would have done himself some justice. Just.
And what was all
I couldn't think
for? What was that for? Again, what was that for?
But you see, something else I noticed, and I can't say this for a fact, so I'll be careful, but if you watch the video, you would see sort of someone egging him on and almost telling someone to step aside. And I've not mentioned anyone's name, but those scenes, I can't believe it. Muntaka, John Jinapo, and so many of them, I mean.
Yeah, let's look at the papers. They talk about that. So, you want to start?
Well, let's indeed commence with the Daily Graphic. Akufo-Addo begins second term, pledges strong economy and jobs. And he says he's going to preoccupy himself with the building of pathways that would create jobs for young people. I mean, today, even as we got feedback or the thoughts of some people from Nadoli Kaleo, where Alban Sumana Bagbin has served for quite a long time, some 28 years. Some of them spoke, and one of the things they made mention of, I recall hearing this lady talking about the fact that they need jobs. The availability of jobs in some of those areas are not so good, and they need jobs. He also, the president spoke about establishing a strong economy and bringing about structural transformation to value-added activities. He spoke about the maturing of our democracy and the delivery of quality services, even as he, touched on the economy as well. Then, of course, before I get to the international front, that story captured here, ugly scenes precede election of speaker, swearing in of MPs. But something else I just want to hammer on, the military presence in Parliament. And Honorable Mutala, Member of Parliament for Tamale Central, yesterday in my interaction with him, called it a coup d'etat. And he said that, in fact, and these are his words again, that the Defense Minister, Honorable Nitiwo, he had heard him making a call to the military and with witnesses, and he had told him to cease doing that. But, well, we saw that presence in Parliament. What exactly that means, I am not so sure, but I feel those created, unnecessary tension in the House. Let's also, the story is there. Road Minister warning road encroachers on page 14. You can check out details of that. And like I shared on social media yesterday, maybe one of the most fortunate politicians of our time, the Fomena MP, Honorable Isiama, from the stone that was rejected to becoming the cornerstone. So interesting one there. I'll just wrap up with the international section of the paper, just taking the headlines because there are some interesting ones. Côte d'Ivoire's opposition to take part in legislative polls, and in some, you know what happened in the Ivory Coast and all the rancor and all of that. But they're saying in the parliamentary election, they formed a coalition. They're going to participate fully, and like here in Ghana, the wrangling, they are saying they are going to win. So we wait to see what happens there. South Africa buys 1.5 million doses of AstraZeneca vaccine. I'm asking myself, when are we getting any? And Uganda readies to elect MPs to represent the elderly. Now, I found this interesting because the Ugandan parliament 2 years ago passed a law to create 5 special seats representing each region of the country for its senior citizens. They've also been giving some monthly stipends, so about some 300,000 of them. Not all of them, but some of them, between $5 and $7. So those are some of the major stories there. And to wrap on the back page, SNIT monthly pensions up by 10%. So simply put, if you were earning 300 cedis a month, it means now you're going to get, with the other details factored in, about an 11.5% increase, pushing the figure to 334.49 Ghana cedis. You know, in recent times, we've spoken about the fact that the pensions, they are simply not enough. So at least a positive step in 2021.
Let's do the Ghanaian Times newspaper on the front page. Essentially, what happened yesterday with the swearing in of President Akufo-Addo and his vice president, and of course, the new Speaker of the 8th Parliament. On page 3 in the Ghanaian Times, 55 criminal offences recorded in Hohoi municipality. Chinese businessman cries for justice. He's appealed to the Ghana police to expedite investigation into a case of assault on him. He had essentially purchased a piece of land, went on it, but he was beaten really badly. The reports, the medical reports, is part of the story. Also, 47-year-old woman arrested for allegedly possessing cannabis. And then I'll take you to page 12 of the paper. This is the bit about politics, and it's on Mahama's statement as he released a statement congratulating the speaker, but also talked about investigations into military invasion of parliament. That angle of the statement is in the paper today. President Akufo-Addo sworn in for a second 4-year term, but NDC boycott ceremony. That's on page 15 of the paper. I'll take you to page 18, where they also capture the confusion, chaos, disorder, and drama ushering in the 8th Parliament. And I'll put my rich experience at disposal of Parliament, says Alban Bagbin. There is a story. Okay, there's another one of interest. Draft bill to decongest prisons in Offin, and this is on page 23 of the Ghanaian Times. This will help decongest the country's prisons. It's been prepared to be passed into law, hopefully. It has provisions for custodial sentence, community service, or alternative imprisonment. The Chief Public Relations Officer of the Ghana Prison Service, Superintendent of Prisons, Carriage Achem, disclosed this to the Ghanaian Times in Accra yesterday. He said congestion in the prisons kept rising, giving an example that a total of 13,325 inmates were sent to the country's various prisons from January 2020 to January 4, 2021. Of course, this is a big worry, explaining that 9,945 stranded capacity of all the prisons had been exceeded.
Mama V, and this is something I'm passionate about, the custodial sentences and all of that, because you go to other places and you remember during COVID-19, the president exercised his prerogative of mercy at a point, decongesting, I think twice or at least once, but they said a lot more remained to be done. And the situation of prisoners, that's why we have Operation Efiase and all of that, people donating 1 CD and above. So I think this is highly, in the right direction. And sometimes the offenses, that's why I feel that our criminal offenses, act and all of that ought to be looked at, because for the most petty offenses, people end up, and some people, unfortunately, yes, it's theft or they've stolen or something, but you see, maybe the person is hungry, doesn't have, I'm not justifying it, but I'm saying that they are so petty compared to maybe what some of our politicians do, embezzling state funds and all of that, and even the sort of punishment available. So I'm thinking this is a very positive
Absolutely. One last thing also on page 10 of the Ghanaian Times. They've actually put the crimes, gory crimes, tragic incident recorded in 2020. Just a little bit of what they've managed to put together. So they've recorded the crimes that shocked people most, including the killing of an assembly member at Sogakofe, Mauto Ajahili in the Volta region, University of Ghana law professor Emmanuel Yaubene, and the member of parliament from Fanseman in the central region, Eko Kwanza Hayford. The lynching of Madame Ekia Dente at Kafaba near Salaga in the Savannah region, shooting incidents at Ewutu Sinya, attack on Keta MP elects, well, I guess now member of parliament for Keta, and the arrest of members of alleged Western Togoland secessionist group, as well as the sporadic violence and deaths that characterized the 2020 general elections, made the headlines in the media. It's a very extensive report. You can take your time and grab the paper and learn from what we recorded back in 2020.
Right. Let's take a look at the Ghanaian Publisher newspaper. It says Akufo-Addo stresses national unity as he begins second term. I will faithfully serve my nation, Bagbin, and Zoom Lion disinfects schools in Bono East ahead of reopening. But I would like to focus briefly on this one, another international story. The 25th Amendment, can Trump be declared unfit for office? So that's a discussion now. And some are pushing that Vice President Pence should initiate the process on the back of those supporters of his who besieged Capitol Hill, and for the fact that he has not condemned it. You remember I've forgotten, is it the Something Boys, if you recall. Some of these groups that have actually, Something Boys, and some of their, so to speak, racist activities. And it's a trend. He never condemns these actions. And some are calling now on broadcast network, ABC News and others, that though, he's going to be in office for only the next few days till the 20th, if possible, he should be declared unfit for office. There are, indications that he may not even be at the inaugural ceremony of Joe Biden. And in recent times, both Twitter and Facebook have had cause to take him off and threaten that if he continues, they'll block him permanently. So that's on the international front. But let me ask you, Mama B, I always do this. What's the craziest thing you would do for your husband? Or for your loved ones? What's the craziest, do you think?
The craziest? I'm not sure what constitutes crazy. Would you want to give me...
How far would you go? Okay, so here's an example. I've read stories of a father who saw his daughter, an alligator approaching his daughter. He doesn't know how to swim. He just went in there not thinking and anything. He was able to rescue her, but if things had gone the other way, because he doesn't know how to swim, he just went in there, and this was huge.
I'll probably do the same for my husband.
Right.
Yeah. Right. I won't think about it.
Anyway, this story on page 10. The craziest thing I did so my ex-boyfriend could have a job.
Ex-boyfriend?
Ex-boyfriend.
When he was still
So eventually... Anyway, you might want to check out details in there. Interesting story.
No, but if you've done it, you can share.
Okay, so let me... It says... It's pretty lengthy, but basically it's about some sacrifices she had to make, and some of them bordering on, you know what, some things that maybe shouldn't be done. That's why I'm trying to avoid.
Okay, we hear you. I won't go far for an ex, by the way.
I think it happened while they were still before. So she's reporting it because now the person is.
But there are certainly things I wouldn't do if we're still dating and we're not married.
Right.
Yeah.
The question often is, how far would you go? Because there are people who are merely dating. It's not a courtship or anything, but the sort of things someone would go. I am not in support of having the person come to your place, cook, wash your... I even think that when you're married, some of these things, people make it as though the woman, so to speak, were some, I find it very unfortunate. But people do a lot of that. And that's what leads to the heartbreak, because you've done all these things and the person says, okay, it's enough. From here, I no longer... That was part of what we saw here. So you might want to know your limits, especially when you've not tied the knot.
Even when you're married, you've got to appreciate the limits. And when you sacrifice, just know that you're doing it. Yeah. Anything could happen. The fact that it's marriage doesn't mean that you two can't go your separate ways. But would you look back on the sacrifices and say, I regret doing those? I don't want to get there. You get what I mean? Yeah. So I do it because I want to do it, for the love of it. Yeah. And when I move on, I have moved on. No, and
I appreciate the fact that even in marriage, you're setting those limits, because if you don't, people burn out. They give so much. I read something once about a marriage box, so to speak. And in simple terms, it says you can't get out of the box what you're not putting into the box. So you want the other person always to put in the commitment, the time, the cooking, and everything. What are you putting into the box?
Yeah.
So some reciprocity important. Let's check out.
All right, find the newspaper front page. Gbagban makes history as speaker nominated by opposition party. SNIT increases 2021 pension pay by 10%. $1 billion development fund for Volta. Dignitaries from more than 40 countries attend Ekufuado's inauguration. And yesterday I was imagining all of them sitting in their hotels watching our television, and also enjoying, maybe not enjoying, it was like a movie, like some Kumawood action movie. We were all watching it. All right, Ekufuado, Dr. Bawumia sworn in, jobs robust economy, high on government's agenda for next 4 years. 3-member committee to probe case of impounded timber worth 400,000 Ghana cedis, all on the front page of the Finder newspaper. That's how it looks like this morning. Ben started off talking a bit about the pension. I want to also look at it just a little bit. And there's something significant that has been said in this statement that was issued by the SNIT Public Affairs Department explaining the new development. I want to get to the point where they talk about the basic, everything that you get in terms of the contribution to your pension is from the basic salary that you receive. But some companies are being very smart and we are not talking. Yeah. So we forget that when you get increments and those little increments are pushed to allowances, it may not reflect in the basic. So your pension still remains even though you're getting increments regularly. You would see the significance of that when you retire someday and you're receiving very little as your pension.
Right.
Yeah. So that's something that we should all pay attention to.
And it's become a trend.
Enjoying the increments, but look at where the increment is going to exactly and see whether or not it's reflecting in the contribution to your pension.
It's become a trend that I'm seeing almost everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's because of the benefits of that too. The entities involved. So something you ought to look at. But again, save. Don't let your pension, whether tier 1, tier 2 or whatever, tier 2 or 3, be your... Ensure that you're doing the right thing so that your pension would just be something that you use for exigencies rather than, surviving on.
Yeah. But the low basic salaries, even though you have a lot more money in your pocket, the basic salary is still very low, and that is where the pension is taken from.
So the person getting 334, 344, you ask yourself, in 2021, Ghana, what can you do with that?
Yeah.
If that is your sole, support every month, what can you really do?
So, we're quick to say, and I get it, SNIT should do more, but we also have to take responsibility, and the organizations, the companies must also take responsibility. You see, when you see some people's pay slip, the deductions are a lot. Yeah. But what it also tells you is that they're saving a lot in when it comes to pensions. Yeah. But you look at other people, not enough deductions because they get so much in allowances. Yeah. But the basic salary, no, that's where the problem is.
Right. Well, I'll just do this. The last two papers reflect the same stories we've been talking about, but I just wanted to touch on democracy, not winner takes all affair, Che Mensa Bunsu. Now, I just called them the leader of the MPP and the leader of the NDC because I can't talk of who is majority or minority. I don't even know that, but a good call there. If they are now realizing that it's not zero-sum, it's not winner takes all, because in the past, that's the impression that has been created, that we win, we take it all, and we do whatever we please. You know what they've said in Parliament. You have your say, we'll have our way.
Yeah,
well,
we can't say same with the 8 parliaments.
It's not going to be the same ballgame.
All right, my last paper is the Daily Dispatch. Real quick, front page, Akufo-Addo sworn in for his final term. Surprise, Bagbin elected Speaker. Starting in Monday's Daily Dispatch, the 2020 gazetted parliamentary results. They also talk about the disinfection of some schools in Bono East ahead of reopening. But if you look at the back page, there's one story that caught my eye. Kennedy Japan celebrated on Twitter for orderly conduct in Parliament. It talks about how he's been very vocal. I mean, man is about money and, and people actually didn't expect that throughout the chaos, he would be the man, carrying out a mediation duty, if you like.
I saw him tapping shoulders and patting people on there, and I was like, wow.
Yeah, and they talk about him also playing a very important role in seeing the military that got into the chamber out of it. So people are bigging him up on Twitter. They said he should have been at the forefront, considering the kind of person that they've known him to be. But surprisingly, he was the one calming tempers.
Well, it's not every day that someone will get into. I think maybe we have time to do more online, or would you do another paper?
No, we can go ahead.
No, but you would do that. I'm just going to
in some 10 seconds. My Joe online, huh?
Yes,
okay, sure.
In some 10 seconds, look at the trends. Bitcoin at 10. The AM show is at number 7. We've been trending. So that's it. And Lakers at number 2. Let's check out My Joy Online very quickly. And then we'll wrap up from there. Mamavi?
Dawn of 8th Parliament, 8 hours of rancor, military invasion, an illegal MP, and musical chairs. MP sat on an MP. After chaotic scenes in Parliament, Akufo-Addo is sworn in for second term with NDC MPs boycotting inaugural ceremony. Oh, and here's the MP who was sat on, right? I didn't touch her. She just sat on me. This is like some child's play, isn't it? Like,
yesterday I tried speaking with Ursula.
She just sat on me. Oh my God, to think that.
I mean, the suggestiveness.
That's an MP explaining what had happened.
But I feel bad about where she fell to her knees and the pushing, the shoving, and all of that. I feel it was rather unfortunate.
Listen, I think all the incidents we recorded were very low moments, like lots of low moments. Very unnecessary. I mean, how do you take a chair of a person? Like, seriously, how do you do that?
And the Ursula I know, yesterday after the inauguration, I mean, the swearing in of the president, when I saw her, she was so drained. In fact, she couldn't even, I mean.
And when she fell on her knees, she also decided to attack Collins Dowda. Like, the man was just sitting there. And well, we couldn't hear what they were saying, so nobody can say maybe he said something, he didn't say anything. But what we saw was he was seated, and she just pushed him.
Yeah.
Just pushed him.
Yeah.
Charlie, these scenes, we can't forget about these scenes.
No, how can we? And if we just
after the
sweep them under the carpet, of course, there'll be consequences.
After the ceremony yesterday, some of the MPs that you interacted with sounded more like, oh, it's happened, we've moved on. We elected a speaker with.
See what I was trying to pin them down on what they would do about it, because if you or if I were to do something similar, can you imagine that?
It would just
snatching a ballot box or snatching ballot papers.
It would just be privileges committee. It's their house, really. But we will come back and talk more about it. They can decide to move on when they're talking to us, but we aren't moving on. I mean, these are things that, and yesterday I talked about the fact that yesterday was Constitution Day. Yesterday was a very important, significant day, and they decided to show us this yesterday. So listen, we're moving on. We're definitely talking about it. We've got to take a breather. We'll bring you sports when we come back. We're staying with what they left us with as they duly constituted the 8th Parliament.
Thank you very much for staying with us this Friday morning on the AM show. Now, we're going to be digging into, some of what we witnessed yesterday in the August House of Parliament as Akufo-Addo was sworn in to begin what will be his second and last term as president of this country. There's a lot to talk about, different perspectives to share on the behavior of parliamentarians and among other matters. Now, joining us for this conversation from the security angle and from other angles, we have Professor Kwesi Enning, security analyst and director, Faculty of Academic Affairs and Research, Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. We also have Professor Kwabena Safo-Kantanka, senior research fellow with Odikro. And of course, we have Dr. Kwesi Amache Boateng, political scientist at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. Gentlemen, a very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us on the AM show.
Good morning. Good morning.
Great. Let me just also mention that the AM show is brought to you by Elegant Homes. If you want to own that home that will stand the test of time, think Elegant Homes. They help us bring you this show every weekday morning. So let me start with you, Professor Enning, on the happenings, developments yesterday, and what you make of it before we zero in on the security perspective and what exactly happened.
Well, it was a day of infamy, a day of disgrace for our politics, a day that basically showed that the gangsterism that we've characterized as vigilantism is actually perpetrated, supported, funded by some of these people who sit in that house. The behavior, the utterances, the fisticuffs was so distasteful, so uncalled for, and it raises a very fundamental question, or probably a set of questions about the ethics and the morality that drives our politics, and more importantly, the principles that should guide our behavior. I think the House and the individual political parties have a lot of soul searching to do. They have to apologize to the people of Ghana, precisely because Parliament does not work in a vacuum. It needs the citizenry whose hard work pays and maintains them, and whose trust led to their being voted for. So it's a sad day, although we ought to have been celebrating the unique election of a speaker from the opposite side of the House. Nothing must and can be swept under the carpet. This is disgraceful. Yesterday, I spent quite a bit of time on the international media trying to explain different facets of what angle the international media came to this very infamous day for us. So it's a sad day for Ghana's democracy, and a potentially dangerous one too.
Okay. Do you consider this a slur on our governance system, especially the legislative body? Because mind you, yesterday, interestingly, was Constitution Day. And on that day, our parliamentarians found it fitting to, so to speak, disgrace the country. What is your take on it?
Probably most of them did not recognize or remember that it was Constitution Day. If they did, they didn't care and they didn't give a hoot. And that is what even makes it more dangerous and more unacceptable. You know, yesterday was a very raw demonstration of the disrespect of some parliamentarians for the people of Ghana, for the sacrifices that we make or we have made to place them in that house, our collective expectations of what they can deliver and ought to deliver. Because you see, the people of Ghana on the 7th of December made very conscious choices. That's the way our politics has been played out since the Fourth Republic, that we wanted a much more nuanced, mature, collaborative form of politics. So we are voting in ways that will join the House to deliver in particular ways. And if what happened yesterday is reflective of how the processes through the voter registration, the campaign, the actual voting, relation, leading to what happened yesterday is anything to go by, then we have a lot of soul searching to do.
Right.
There's no way to describe this than to say it's an utter disgrace. It was dishonorable performance, and they owe us, the ordinary people of Ghana, an apology, an inquiry into what happened, and the blatant disrespect for the ethics of parliamentarianism, the violence displayed in the House, and the gangsterism of some of the behavior that we saw.
Right. And what you say is supported by what Tamale Central Member of Parliament, Honorable Mutala, has been saying, that for him, he would like an investigation into it. But let me quickly go to Dr. Kwesi Amache Boateng. Now, yesterday, what we saw is nothing short of a mixed martial arts display in Parliament, with our parliamentarians doing shocking things. What is your assessment of what you saw yesterday?
Thank you for the opportunity. Let me say good morning to your viewers. Actually, you know, like my colleague Hazilia said, it was a terrible day for Ghana.
Right.
But beyond that, in terms of political science, we look at, you know, stability of the state. We look at the stability of the state. And one of the means by which this is measured has to do with the extent to which, generally speaking, the elites show voluntary commitment to the constitution of the relevant state. In this case, the constitution of the Fourth Republic of Ghana. And you do this measurement, especially in times when their core interests are at stake. And so it is best done during elections. And when politicians see themselves as losing elections, then you realize that they place themselves, their interest, their selfish interest, over that of the state, that of the constitution of the state. So right from the very word go, during the registration exercise, the campaign, the day of voting itself, and immediately afterwards, we were treated to, you know, various threats coming from politicians, threats against the state, threatening the Ghanaian state, threatening to destabilize the state. People consciously inciting members of the security. Statements like bullets have no faces. Bullets who hit anybody at all. All these were uncalled for. And actually, these prepared the ground for what manifested yesterday. Because over there, you know, they placed themselves in a position where this winner-take-all rationality played out. It was a do-and-die affair, so to speak. And so they were not ashamed. In the presence of the cameras, they were prepared to do what they did. It comes to one thing. The political elites themselves are
Hello, Doc. Are you still with us?
Conscious of the constitution. Like I was saying, you know, I'm sorry, I'm using my phone and occasionally people call in.
Sure.
The political elites themselves are contentious of the Fourth Republican Constitution of Ghana, and to that extent, not showing commitment to the Constitution. And so are the very people, if they were to have their own way, would destabilize the country. Let me quickly bring what is happening in the US and the fact that the military bosses over the years have all come together to warn the sitting president. This is unprecedented over there. But it relates very much to what is happening here. Individual politicians placing their interest over that of the state. So that's exactly what, you know, we were treated to yesterday.
Right.
If they were prepared to fight the way they did, they would lead, you know, armies to destabilize Ghana if they get the opportunity. And now we heard them. We heard them immediately after the elections. Their statements, some of these are captured on video. They are not committed to Ghana. They are not.
Now, Doc, you have studied the politics of this country, and you spoke about that zero-sum situation where it's a winner-take-all, sort of race that we have in terms of our politics. We've heard the former majority leader, I should say, Oseiche Mensah-Bonsu, say that that should not be the case. It shouldn't be winner-take-all. But let me just ask you this. Do you feel, on the back of happenings in Parliament yesterday, that our political party politics has become so antagonistic, maybe the worst we've ever seen in the Fourth Republic and beyond? What is your assessment as a political scientist?
Actually, it is what the individual members of the parties carry into the party. When you take a look at their primaries, and especially here in Kumasi, they go about it with the same do-and-die affair. So at the end of the day, it is the selfish interests of individuals that play out. You know, when they come together in the name of the party, then it's the same thing that proceeds there, that unfolds there. It's very unfortunate. If you were to take a look back and examine what happened during the primaries, you know, some of the developments, you know, that unfolded, it's not necessarily different from what, you know, we're seeing now. So as it is, yes, it is that do-and-die affair, antagonistic posture of the parties towards one another in respect of their selfish interests.
Right, but I just want you to hit the nail on the head.
When it comes to issues that they have common interest in, they easily come together to execute it. We witnessed this in yesterday. When, if you like, I mean, the NDC got what they wanted, you know, and the MPP was ready to go with it. Sanity prevailed. They could even come to some compromises, consensus, and get the first speaker and the second speaker through without elections.
Right.
They didn't serve Ghana's interest, you know, yesterday.
Right.
Yes,
I just want you to be very brief on this one. I wanted to know from you.
Individual members who carry these selfish, you know, tendencies into the parties.
Right. Is this the worst you've seen in our legislature? Maybe in the Fourth Republic, or maybe through you know, the period from independence. Just very briefly, is this the worst you've ever seen? We appear to be struggling a bit with the connection with regard to Dr. Kwesi Amachie-Boateng. Let me quickly move on to Professor Kantanka, who's also been on the line. And I'll put that same question to you. You can feed in briefly your quick thoughts on what happened yesterday. But do you feel this is the worst we've ever seen in that third, you know, or the second arm of government, that is the legislature, in the history of this country?
Thank you very much. And let me say good morning to our viewers and good morning to my panel members, especially Professor Kwesi. I'm privileged to be on the same platform with him. I respect him so much about his views. I think in a way I'll say yes. What we saw yesterday, in terms of my own observations of the Fourth Republican Ghana, it's the worst ever. Because I haven't seen military officers enter the floor of parliament before, not in the history of this country. I may not be that old, but in terms of what I have seen, what we saw yesterday was the worst. But generally, let me chip in this. If you're looking at the behavior of parliament generally, apart from what we saw yesterday, I would normally say that Ghana's parliament is a bit quieter and calmer than some other parliaments elsewhere. You know, as a parliamentary discourse analyst, I've had an occasion to look at the UK Parliament. When I was doing my PhD, I looked at the UK and Ghanaian Parliament in a form of comparison. And I realized that in terms of parliamentary behavior, if we're looking at the House of Commons, and especially during the Prime Minister's question time, you realize that they are rowdier than even the Ghanaian Parliament. So sometimes I am a bit accommodating when it comes to behaviors such as heckling, such as jeering during debates and all that. So in terms of that, we will say that's fine. In parliamentary settings, you are bound to see some of these things across the world. But yesterday's behavior was a bit different. If you don't mind, I will read a little bit of what the description of the UK Parliament House of Commons to you, what the general public say about the UK Parliament, especially the House of Commons. In fact, in 2014, you had the then Speaker of Parliament describing the behavior of the British MPs as full of yobbery and public school twittishness. That's how it was described. And the Parliamentary Society of the UK Parliament conducted some research around the same period. And some of the descriptions, you could see the parliament being described as, parliamentarians being described as being childish, over the top, and their behavior was pointless and all that. In fact, unsavory comments about the UK Parliament by the citizens of the UK. So what I'm trying to say is that parliamentary behavior, being rowdy, full of heckling and all that, around the world, you know, you are talking about the oldest parliament of the world, that's the British Parliament. So some of these things are there. But in terms of what happened yesterday, I cannot accommodate that. And that is condemnable. And I agree with Professor Kwesi, I couldn't agree with him more when he describes it as coming on the back of what we've been seeing over the years in terms of our electoral processes. And I'm worried about the vigilante behavior that we saw in Parliament yesterday. In other words, the implication is that what are the parliamentarians telling the people out there? Tomorrow when we have elections, assuming in the next few days, we have a by-election to conduct. What are you telling the people? What are you saying they should do? And if that kind of behavior is telling Ghanaians that, well, you can do anything you want in order to win power and all that, then it's very unfortunate coming from Parliament.
Right.
And I'm very worried about that kind of behavior when you had people, that chaotic in Parliament yesterday.
Right.
Let me just sit down and...
Okay, so if you're done, Professor Kantanka.
No, I thought you were interrupting, not knowing it was my co-panel.
Okay, then you can round up before I move on to Professor Enning one more time.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that we must all condemn what we saw yesterday. And I'm looking forward to seeing a situation where in the future, maybe a constituency will be bold enough to pass a vote of no confidence in an MP, and so that we go through a by-election. We withdraw our MP from Parliament if the law allows that. I'm not too sure about that. So that MPs will know that, yes, we abhor certain behaviors on the floor of Parliament because they are there to represent us, our interest and not their interest.
Okay.
Of course, MPs, when it comes to interest, normally they put their interest at the forefront. But we must see that while they are talking about their interest, the state's interest must be the first priority that we should see. So for me, we should call on all Ghanaians to condemn what we saw yesterday. We're looking forward to seeing situations coming back to normalcy. And I believe that apart from, because yesterday was a unique day because of what we saw in the elections, the numbers and the election of the speaker. And you realize that immediately after the selection of the speaker, things came to normalcy. And I'm expecting that to continue. And I believe that it will continue, especially when the numbers that are that close and that the government of the day, in a way, will be forced to be consensual in their language, in what they say, so that they can win the support of the opposition.
Okay,
So
Prof, I would have you pause there briefly so I can continue with Professor Enning as well. Now, Prof,
you can continue.
On the security end of things, I spoke to the Tamale Central MP and he referred to what happened yesterday, the military swooping, on Parliament, the military, joint force of the military and the police as a coup d'etat. Was that a security breach? And what are the implications of what happened?
Well, I think what happened yesterday in terms of the entry of the police and the military onto the floor of the House raises very disturbing issues around command and control, around the issuance of particular orders under particular circumstances. If what happened yesterday is to be perceived as a riot and therefore demanding the presence of security agencies to quell it, then one would have expected that the police would have been requested for. They would have discussed what ought to be done with the marshals of the House, and they would then have attempted to bring some sanity. Now, if it was the police, then there are procedures for bringing in the police to quell a demonstration. But what we were seeing, as Safo Kantanka has said, was just an excessively extreme form of misbehavior by our parliamentarians. It had degenerated into all sorts of things. But by the entry of a fully armed combat force into the chamber, the dynamics changed. And herein lies the danger that people probably do not see, but of course are concerned. Throughout the Fourth Republic, we have seen the deliberate use of the security agencies in situations where they ought not to have been used. This is leading to an erosion of the bonds of respect and trust between the citizenry on one hand and then the uniformed forces on the other. Now, let me give you a couple of examples relating to this erosion of trust and the mission and the vision of these uniformed forces. A couple of years ago in Kaswa, the military were deployed to deal with a land case that resulted in the death of, I think, 2 uniformed officers. We saw during the just ended voters registration public opprobrium and anger against uniformed forces, resulting in hooting, abuse, pelting with stones, behavior from the citizenry that one would not expect towards its security force. And that shows this slippage in that bond that should be maintained through trust, respect, and reciprocity. We saw the case, a land case, in which 2 military officers were arrested by the citizenry, battered, and you could see the fear in their eyes as they pleaded for dear life and said they had been ordered from above. So we are seeing this erosion of trust, but whoever requested for the military to enter the house when that presence was not necessary means that now that calm has come, and I think Safo Kantanke's point about immediately the speaker was elected, calm returned to the house. We need a very quick, sober, reflective process, once more an inquiry about the command and control issues that led to the presence of the uniformed forces on the floor of the house. Because there is something with uniformed forces. The nature of their training is that when those who hold civil order are perceived to misuse that civil authority, and they are always brought in to bring control, once more, it undermines the capacity of that civil institution to play that oversight role. When that erosion of respect continues over time, law and order breaks down.
Prof,
So
let me sneak in a quick one here. Now, you've spoken about who may have given the order. The Tamale Central Member of Parliament suggests somebody. I'll not mention the designation of the person or the person's name, but the question is, whoever gave the order, do you feel that person should be called to order himself or herself?
Well, I think now the different committees of Parliament will be established. And when those committees are established, then it becomes necessary for that committee, that the Defense and Interior, but of course the military or the uniformed forces work, and the funding comes or is approved both by the Finance Committee and the Public Accounts Committee. So these 3 committees would have to say what happened that day. How were the orders issued? What were the circumstances? What were they supposed to do when they entered the house? Because the question is, if there had been a confrontation, what would have been the outcome, and how would that outcome have been interpreted in the barracks?
Okay.
Okay. So this is not just a simple incident of the military entering the hallowed chambers. The members themselves behaved in a manner that denigrated the house and the chamber. But it was not serious enough for the military to have entered that chamber.
Let me bring in, rope in Dr. Amache Boateng at this point. So, Doc, I want to find out from you, looking at the circumstances and all that has been said, if ordinary citizens do some of the things we saw our parliamentarians, lawmakers on Constitution Day do, there would be severe penalties. What should be the punitive measures for some of these members of parliament who engaged in these actions? Professor Safu Kantanka, I think I'll direct that question to you rather, if you heard me. The actions of some of our parliamentarians yesterday were, things that our Constitution does not support, and any citizen who engages in that would face severe penalties. But we saw members of parliament do that. What do you think should be the punitive measures? At a point you were talking about some, provisions being added maybe to our Constitution to ensure that some of these people can be withdrawn. And we have some of these in other jurisdictions. What do you think should happen to these members of parliament, ballot box movers, ballot snatchers, kung fu, the antics we saw yesterday? What should happen to them?
Well, I think that is normally said that Parliament is a master of his own laws, and that is the reason it was unfortunate the military officers and the police officers entered the floor of Parliament yesterday. It becomes very difficult to see the kind of punishment you normally give to an ordinary citizen being applied to an MP. But in their own standing orders, there are ways they can find to penalize, or if you like, punish those MPs that will be found culpable if there's an investigation. Some of their privileges can be withdrawn. You can lose some allowances and some of the immunities that you have for a period of time. You can be called to the bar of Parliament to apologize and do all kinds of things. In parliamentary context or in political context, sometimes offering an apology is a way of trying to deflate the personal ego of an MP. So there are ways they can handle this so that going forward, we can check the behavior of MPs. Otherwise, yesterday was the first day of the 8th Parliament. If we are not careful and then we don't investigate and take the appropriate measures or put in place the appropriate measures to curtail that kind of behavior, it will continue. And if it continues, it won't augur well for us as a state, as a country. And so I believe that going forward, there are ways Parliament itself can handle that and make sure that those who are found culpable, especially those who issue the orders. Yesterday, I remember some names came up. I'm not too sure. I can speculate. There were journalists there. They mentioned names. I remember I was on one of your sister stations monitoring the processes. And the reporter mentioned one particular name that he was the one who ushered in the military officers. If it is true, very unfortunate. And I'm looking forward to seeing a situation where that person will be penalized or punished by Parliament itself so that we can bring some sanity into the behavior of MPs going forward so that they can concentrate on the work of Parliament, legislating, representation, and oversight.
Okay.
Otherwise, for me, I'm not going to be too happy about the future of this Parliament. We need to see. Of course, you remember that normally when Parliament does its own investigations, we complain about not seeing proper punishment being meted out to individuals who are found culpable. Remember situations where somebody like Mahama Yariga, the honorable MP for Boko, was asked to apologize after an investigation. We want to see some of these things, but not just an apology. By going forward, we want to see a situation where some privileges of MPs can be withdrawn.
Right. Now, Prof. Safo Kantanka, I'll come to you with this bit before I move on again to Professor Enning. Looking at all the things we're discussing now, in fact, yesterday, again, I'll not mention names owing to the sensitivity of the issues we're discussing here, but I overheard, together with my colleagues, I have my colleagues as witnesses, one of these members of parliament who engaged in these activities that all of us are so embarrassed about. And this member of parliament was unrepentant, basically saying that if he had the opportunity, he would do it again for his party. Of course, I'll not mention his name or which side he was on. But what then do we do that to ensure that what has started is not continued? How do we, or how do the political parties mend fences and work together moving forward? What do they do? It would appear we are facing challenges with Professor Safo Kantanka's line connection as well. Prof, so if you can hear me, yes. I'm basically asking that owing to the unrepentant, feeling or emotions or what we're seeing from some of the members of parliament, how do they move forward, mend fences, and ensure that moving forward we'll not see such actions in future, and that again, the work of parliament will be smooth in this 8th, parliament?
Well, I mean, whilst we try to get Dr. Professor Safo Kantanka's thing to work, can I respond?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. Look, I've said this over and time again. Political party affiliation support work must and is predicated on shared principles, shared norms, and shared values. It cannot be right that an individual whose behavior has brought disrepute to his or her party can be recalcitrant and shows a willingness and a disrespect. First, a willingness to recommit the same offense, but also a disrespect to the voting public, that given the chance, I will do the same thing again. So this goes beyond the role of the punitive actions and the sanctions that Parliament can bring on board, and actually lays the blame or the expectations of changed behavior and attitude on the political parties themselves. What kinds of integrity, behavior, performance do they expect the individuals who put themselves forward to represent their constituencies and by extension the parties to have? Okay, what can they bring on board to promote, deepen, strengthen our politics, our institutions, so that the interest of the generality of the Ghanaian people can be served? So when people show this recalcitrance and an unwillingness to change, even in the face of video evidence, then we need to go back to the drawing table and to say, what are the types of behavior that we are looking for? Because you see, what we have shown or seen makes our diplomacy going forward very difficult. Because although the UK Parliament can be quite tough sometimes, You know, there's a debating culture. If you remember when we were kids, debating societies in our secondary schools were robust societies that encouraged diversity of views, opinions, but still all done within a certain framework where you didn't threaten it. It never degenerated into fisticuffs. You know, so there's a certain sort of recognition of that form of public engagement. Ours degenerated yesterday, and I'm hoping that the leadership of the different parties in Parliament will call those who kicked boxes, snatched ballots, took the ballot papers and boxes away, which are acts that go against the vigilantism bill, Act 999. You know, so there is some credibility issues that the parties will have to come with or deal with. They have to eat humble pie and come before the people of Ghana, as Professor Bakantanga has said, and apologize in a manner that as citizens we find sincere, and going forward change their behavior.
Okay.
I think that is the least that they can do, but there's a lot of hard work for this Parliament to win the trust and the respect of the people of Ghana.
Okay. Professor Safo Kantanka, I think this would be maybe your wrap-up comments. What challenges do you see lying ahead of the 8th Parliament? What are the challenges that, on the back of what we've seen so far, you foresee could plague the 8th Parliament of the 4th Republic?
Well, thank you. Going forward, I think that, well, we haven't had this kind of Parliament before where the numbers are almost the same. And so going forward, we are yet to see what the challenges are going to be. But I can straightforward say that we are going to see a more positive consensual use of language on the floor of Parliament, especially from the government MPs, because for every agreement or bill that is taken to Parliament, you need the support of the opposition to be able to go through the processes. And therefore, this is a time for consensus. And you remember on the day of the State of the Nation address presented by the President, he called for a dialogue consensus among Ghanaians and in our political circles. And I can foresee that. And for me, the nature of the 8th Parliament tells me that we are growing as a country. Our democracy is growing. It's a natural way of learning certain other things, going beyond the usual way of doing business. And so when people are not ready to change, sometimes nature changes them. And so I can foresee that the vitriolic attacks, the vitriolic language that we normally see on the floor of Parliament will come down, and then we will see the usual traditional behavior of Ghanaians, where we respect each other so much. If you look at if you go to a traditional court in a Ghanaian setting, you realize that the language is sober, respectful, and all that. And I can foresee us going back towards some of these things. So I can foresee a situation where this Parliament may be even less chaotic. Of course, when you have gray areas, it can also degenerate into chaotic scenes. The heckling, the jeering, and all those kinds of things will come in. I can foresee that because when the opposition sometimes know that, well, they can force the government to do something in their favor, they are not going to compromise. What it also means is that we are likely to see our laws and agreements being in favor of the interests of the state. Because if we're a government and you have this kind of Parliament, anytime you are taking a bill or an agreement to Parliament, you need to be careful how it is captured, how it is presented. Because if there are questionable clauses in any bill, in any agreement and all that, I bet you the opposition are likely to take advantage of that and question and put the government on its toes. So I can foresee both positive sides and negative sides of the current parliament, but I see more of a positive side of it.
Right. But thank you very much, gentlemen. Of course, Professor Kwabena Safo-Kantanka, Senior Research Fellow with Odikro, and of course, Professor Kwesi Enning, Security Analyst and Director, Faculty of Academic Affairs and Research, Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time, and we wish you the very best. Don't you forget, the show is brought to you by Elegant Homes. Just check them out. They'll give you that dream home. Elegant Homes and General Construction Limited is a wholly owned Ghanaian company with over 15 years experience. Our affiliate company, Elegant Home Products Limited, fabricates and sells high-quality UPVC windows and door profiles from Turkey, plasterboards, cornices, gypsum adhesives, and accessories. We have luxury residential properties in prime areas including East Legon, and we also construct properties in other parts of Ghana. Elegant Homes is now selling 3, 4, 5-bedroom executive detached houses. Its gated community, Elegant Courts at Katamanso, off the Adenta Dodowa Road in Accra. Now, the project has solar street lights, underground sewer systems, 24/7 security, if you're especially concerned about security, tarred roads, constant flow of water, estate management, and a recreational area with a tennis court, playground, swimming pool, and mini shops. What more could you ask for? Clients have the option of choosing from a wide range of architectural designs and have it modified for them if you want customization. You can also request tailor-made services where we build to suit individual taste. Our houses are built to the highest standards, and we ensure that the finest of materials are used to give you excellence, luxury, beauty, and value for your money. Our properties can be located in East Legon, Elegant Courts at Katamanso. You'd want to call us, so do reach out to us on the following numbers: 0244 699 053, 0244 699 053. You can also call 0248 974 428, 0248 974 428. The website, eleganthomesgh.com, eleganthomesgh.com, or sales at eleganthomesgh.com. So don't forget the S, sales at eleganthomes.com. Locate our office in Katamanso, of course. Now, coming up next, Ghana's current democratic dispensation is founded on the 1992 Constitution, a document that sets out our collective and individual rights and aspirations towards development. Like every good project, a candid review is required, lessons learned, and progress made. One Ghana movement, in partnership with the University for, the UPSA, law, powered by Joy FM and Joy News, present the first annual Constitutional Day Lecture. The lecture will be delivered by legal practitioner and Dean of the University for Professional Studies, Accra Law School, Dr. Ernest Kofi Abochi. The topic, realizing the 1992 Constitution beyond elections, public goods and inclusive governance. The date is this Monday, the 11th of January, 2021. The time is 9:30 a.m. prompt. The venue is the West Wing Auditorium of the UPSA in Legon, and the lecture will be broadcast live on Joy 99.7 FM and Joy News, as well as on social media. So join us and let's chart the way forward for our development as intended by the framers of the 1992 Constitution. The first annual Constitutional Day Lecture is brought to you by the One Ghana Movement in partnership with the UPSA Law School and powered by Joy 99.7 FM, Joy News, and myjoyonline.com, home of independent, fearless, and credible journalism. So the conversation with Kofi Abochi is up next. Do stay with us.
Thanks for staying with us here on the AM show. Benjamin Akakpo has already announced the lecture that's coming up next Monday. On the back of that, the topic really is realizing the 92 Constitution beyond elections, public goods and inclusive governance. I've got the Dean, Faculty of Law, UPSA Law School with me, Dr. Ernest Kofi Abochi. He will be the speaker for the event on Monday. A very good morning to you. Happy New Year to you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mama, for having me.
Great. So this conversation is coming on the back of Constitution Day. Yesterday was Constitution Day. You are a man of Constitution, really. You teach Constitution. And so I think it's appropriate for us to start from Parliament, seeing that what happened was really significant and very historic, if you like. First of all, let's talk about the injunction that was served on a member, essentially, so he cannot hold himself up either to be sworn in or hold himself as a member of Parliament elect. But he eventually ended up being sworn in. What does this present?
The relationship of Parliament with the law is a complex one. First of all, the courts and the Ghanaian courts have held over the years that Parliament is a master of its own procedure, and they have indicated that whatever happens in Parliament is a closed book. The Supreme Court, therefore, has given Parliament this autonomy when it comes to the law, that Parliament should regulate itself. Their expectation of that is that Parliament, being the lawmaker, just like the executive, separation of powers, Parliament will, as it were, organize itself in a manner as to ultimately respect the law. I think that complexity hasn't been fully tested. And what happened yesterday, or happened in recent times, again speaks to that, that difficulty, that the relationship between the law and Parliament or members of Parliament. Now, there has always been a way of serving processes on Parliament. A process is a legal document which is generated from the courts. There is a way of serving it on members of Parliament, and you normally go to the Speaker. They have the Speaker, the clerk, and of course the person involved. As to whether or not the failure to comply by the court order will amount to a contempt of court, I'm thinking in the circumstances, quite not, because the law itself has indicated that, or the courts have indicated that Parliament is the master of its own procedure. So Parliament can decide that, given particular circumstances, the proceedings in Parliament should not override, but should take some precedence over a court document, for example, that has been served on a person. As I indicated, this is a complexity because the courts haven't fully clarified that position, that Parliament is the master of its own procedures, in terms of what happens if there's an explicit conflict between what Parliament intends to do and a specific order of the court directed at Parliament or a member of Parliament. That complexity is even accentuated by the fact that the order is directed, or maybe directed, to the person and not to Parliament. In other words, the injunction is against the person and not against Parliament. So Parliament can decide to go ahead and do something, and the question is whether the person against whom the order operates may therefore find himself in contempt, not necessarily Parliament. All these are complications that may not have a reason, and the courts do their possible best to avoid a conflict with Parliament in the interest of separation of powers and in the interest of structural harmony, to avoid a situation where you have organs of government at odds with each other. So my expectation is that the court may not necessarily take a dim and angry view of this. Okay. They'll probably look at this in light of all the complexities of things that are happening and probably understand that somehow things have to evolve.
So the fact that before the dissolution of the 7th Parliament, we saw the NDC side move to the NPP side when Parliament had not been dissolved, that also comes under Parliament is a master of its own rules, so it's their problem?
Well, correct. But again, it's important to understand, and I am not, I've heard so many things being said about majority, minority, all these things. From a constitutional law standpoint, technically, all these don't exist. And I'm saying constitutional law standpoint from the point of view of the Constitution itself. The Constitution itself doesn't speak of the divisions, the internal fragmentation of Parliament. The Constitution merely speaks of Parliament. And, the Speaker, there are key positions the Constitution speaks about. Beyond this, all these other positions that have been mentioned, including minority and majority leaders, these are creations of Parliament itself. And therefore, they are recognized in constitutional law only to the extent that Parliament has internal rules by way of orders, the standing orders of Parliament. So these standing orders of Parliament may come under orders and rules under Article 11 of the Constitution. Article 11 of the Constitution are the sources of law of Ghana. So orders and rules, including parliamentary orders, they may come under that. So they are sources of constitutional law to a degree. But in terms of hard constitutional law, these internal divisions really are not of much consequence, because what the Constitution expects is the Parliament to do its work. And how Parliament does its work, the Constitution hasn't detailed that out. So whether the minority sits on the left and the majority sits on the right, from the standpoint of constitutional law, it's really inconsequential. And for me, again, for the students of political science, they may find it intriguing how the juggling and all that happened in Parliament. Of course, we're still developing. I mean, the things that I saw, like all of us saw, some of which are problematic, especially
ballot paper snatching, distraction of ballot booths. There was also the shoving of an MP. If this were to play out in the national elections, these would be electoral offences, would find people being punished for it. What happens?
Well, that's the problematic aspect of things, as I indicated. One will expect that members of Parliament should demonstrate a certain exemplary standards of behavior that people should copy. And the expectation is, if you have members of Parliament who have been elected to hold the high office of members of Parliament, they should be above board. And so the kinds of things that other people did, which were heavily criticized in the recent elections, one would expect that, you don't expect that of members of Parliament. And particularly for this to play out in the full glare of the public, we're all watching it on TV. This is a highly ceremonial, highly symbolic day for our country, when the President of the Republic is inaugurated, when Parliament is inaugurated. Lots of people are watching TV. And so it's, for this to happen, and for young people, school-going young people, all watching this in terms of the expectation of how to behave from a civic standpoint, I think that was troubling. I found that quite troubling. Having said that, though, it's important to know that Ghana may have just joined the league, the rather unenviable league of parliamentary fighters. I call them parliamentary fighters. And parliamentary fighters, actually, it's quite common around the world, and people may not know this. And in Africa, many countries, including Kenya, have been notorious for having, fights in Parliament.
But we have been quite different.
And that's what I'm saying. We've just joined that league. Unfortunately, we've joined the League of Parliamentary Fighters. I jokingly call them parliamentary fighters, where you see members of Parliament openly, not only squabbling, but literally throwing punches and fists at each other. And seeing that yesterday, just regrettably, in my opinion, set a tone for what to expect in the next 4 years. I was quite happy to hear the President set a tone in his inaugural address when he indicated that we're going to have bipartisanship, where we probably should expect a lot of compromises and concessions, where we should expect the two parties working together. I got that tone from the President's speech, and I think that if we should implement that, hopefully that should quell a lot of the concerns that I, like many other people, I think have, given what we saw on TV yesterday. I think the tension is unnecessarily too high, and there's a need for us to reduce the bombast and a lot of unnecessary tension, in my opinion.
What's the significance of military personnel, armed military personnel, going into the chamber at a time when we didn't even have a speaker, we didn't have a president, we had a president-elect? I mean, it was a very crucial point in our democracy. What do you see on television now as it played out? What's the significance of this?
Well, again, for me, it's all troubling. The optics of things are symbolic and fundamental. And as I indicated, because yesterday was such a symbolic day, let's not really focus too much on the substantive aspect of things, because let's face it, the military people were there, and I don't think they did anything dangerously. I don't think anything dangerously happened. There were no gunshots. There were nothing substantive may have come out of the military officers or the military personnel showing up on the scene, but the symbolic aspect was troubling. This is a highly civilian event. And given the fact that we're dealing with the cream of our country, these are members of Parliament. So like it or not, they're supposed to represent the cream of our country. And so given these are the people we're dealing with, and these people have to literally be controlled by the military from the symbolic standpoint, if you should speak as to the logical reasoning for having them there, then we have a problem. And that's why I found the symbolic aspect of things highly problematic. The fact that these military officers, and we've moved from pre-1992, when Ghana used to be under military rule, and haven't come this far, for us to see military officers on a highly symbolic day like ours, literally having to enter the chamber And I'm not sure exactly what the purpose and the mission for their deployment is. And I'm not challenging the reason or the justification for any security assessment which may have justified that. I do not have access to specific information for me to make any direct statement. But I'm just saying, from the standpoint of the symbolism and the standpoint of the optics, what I saw yesterday by reason of the military officers being there, given the highly symbolic and highly civilian character of the event, I found that quite troubling.
But in the end, we got a speaker who is not from the ruling government, as in the party elected into office now. And he is the third most important person by way of, I guess, power, authority. If the president is not there, the vice president is also not there. He will be the person in charge of the country. Again, I guess maybe the symbolism of that. What does it mean at a time when the two parties don't have majority numerical strength in parliament? What does this say?
Well, I think the president again has hinted on this when he first gave his speech, his victory speech, so to speak. When he first spoke after the elections, he hinted on the fact that the Ghanaian people have spoken, and the Ghanaian people haven't spoken in terms of the distribution of the seats in parliament. The Ghanaian people have spoken to the effect that there's a need for inter-party working together, inter-party cooperation, so to speak. This is the first time this is happening in Ghana's parliament, i.e., we have a speaker who comes officially from a party which is the majority. From a party which is not in government. We have the speaker coming from the party which is not in government for the first time. That is indicative of the fact that the distribution of the power dynamics, both within parliament and in the government as a whole, may be reflecting something of the need for the parties to work together. And again, the fact that the speaker was elected invariably and ostensibly by a likely vote from the NPP may suggest that the current parliament may be interesting, i.e. especially where you have a lot of decisions being taken by a secret ballot, and where the whip's authority may be diminished by reason of that. So we are in a certain uncharted territory and terrain, and I think that the parties need to come to realization of that. From the standpoint of constitutional law and as an academic, I find the development not only interesting, but quite productive. Productive in the sense that if you are in government, you need to now spend a lot more time doing good audit, doing good work, and being clinical about the kinds of things you submit to Parliament. Because your expectation is that Parliament, you're not going to have a free ride anymore. There is no automatic vote, so to speak, waiting for you. The danger of automatic vote is that it tends to create some laxity and laziness in terms of the work of the executive on what to present, because you know that the people are there to vote for you, so to speak. But now that one can expect that the votes are going to be so tight that if you have one member of parliament who decides to vote by reason of conscience, then you have a challenge, which means the executive would have to work harder at conviction, harder at convincing its own people, and then to get the other side to join the ranks, that particular policies are worthy of support. So the overall beneficiary is the country. And so I think we may just have benefited by reason of our constitutional framework. And as I indicated, as an academic, yes, I find that quite interesting.
When we talk about the Constitution beyond elections, this is what has just played out is perfect, right? Exactly.
Again, speaking of the Constitution beyond elections, I think that, and the lecturer is probably going to look at that, I think that our Fourth Republic has been overly fixated on elections. We've measured the success of our Fourth Republic largely by the extent to which we have had smooth transitions, which is a significant development. Nobody is to belittle that. But having said that, that fixation may have distorted exactly what we should expect of the Fourth Republic. Before the Fourth Republic, a lot of Ghanaians were not happy, having lived under military government for decades. If you add the past ones before 1979, many Ghanaians were not happy about developments. And so before the Fourth Republic, the expectation was that we should have our right to self-determination through the ballot box. But beyond that, constitutional rule and constitutional democracy is supposed to deliver on public goods, is to deliver on the basic necessities of life that should make people happy and comfortable. I think that while we have done well as a country over the years in the area of transitions and changing over of power, both political parties actually agree and do concede that we may not have done well in the governing part. And part of the reason we may not have done well in the governing part is because we are so fixated on elections. So as soon as one election is over, we actually start another election. In fact, if you ask me, I'll tell you that the 2024 election has started. Yep. We're almost in electoral cycle. As soon as one is over, the other starts. And that's part of the reason why you see zero bipartisanship. It's part of the reason why the parties don't seem to cooperate on anything. It's part of the reason why a governing party will, literally have to just do well to get its way all the time. And an opposition party or opposing party will have to do its best to undermine the governing party all the time. And so by reason of that, there is just no sense of nationality, no sense of things that are meant for the country, so to speak. So part of the reason for looking at the 92 Constitution beyond elections is to see if we can look at constitutional rule, constitutional democracy beyond the throes of elections, the governing and the governance components.
I wanted to ask about the snatching of the ballot papers, whether or not no state institution can do anything. But most significantly, I want to, especially because of where we are in the conversation, talk about the reasons the Member of Parliament who snatched the ballot papers gave, and he's issued a statement. I just want to read portions of it. It connects to just what you're saying. And he said that I did it for the grassroots who relied on us in power to survive, the president who needs some peace to run the country, and the greater NPP party as a whole, because we cannot always allow the NDC to threaten and vilify us. I apologize, though, to my family and friends, both far and near, who may be affected by my actions. Okay. Just the bit about, I did it for the grassroots who relied on us in part to survive, the president who needs some peace to run the country. And then he comes back to say, we've not seen the end of this yet. With the success, they would tell us what they, the NDC, want and what they don't want in Parliament, because the whip system has been compromised. My question really, after reading this long statement, is, would we move on, or issues would stall? Because we're talking about moving beyond the elections, both parties working together for the interests of the country. But we know that they all have positions, sometimes very entrenched. This is a situation forced on them. It's not their choice. Have we really moved on?
I'm not sure whether I understand the components of whether we've moved on. I mean, first of all, Parliament has to decide what to do with the effect of the ballot box being snatched. And I'm saying this in response to your question as to whether state institutions can do anything about this. The laws of Ghana on elections tend to focus on public elections. This is a specialized election. It's an election that also happened within Parliament. So I am a bit skeptical about the rules governing elections being applied generally to this. But Parliament is a master of its own procedure, as they say, and Parliament can decide to administer some penalty. It's a member of Parliament. There are disciplinary issues. There are disciplinary rules in Parliament. There are ethics that regulates members of Parliament's behavior. So I am confident that should Parliament look within its own internal rules of discipline, there's something that can be done in respect of this member. But I doubt in terms of the general rules on elections in Ghana, because those affect public elections, and this is by no way a public election. It's an in-chamber election meant only for members of Parliament. I am not qualified to partake in that election, so to speak. But in terms of whether we've moved on, again, it's up to the leadership of Parliament. And I get the sense that Parliament itself may have moved past this, particularly because also of the outcome, if you ask me. I think the outcome of the election of the Speaker may invariably have dampened any anger or angst or anxiety on the part of the NDC it appears to have, the outcome appears to have supported some compromise. So we have the head of state, there's an election petition, I know, but until determination of that, we have a head of state, or the president, who is from the NPP. We have the Speaker of Parliament, who is from the NDC, and then we have the Chief Justice, who is a Chief Justice, who doesn't belong anywhere. And so we have, the structure of government appears to have been balanced in some ways, reflecting a certain degree of compromise. So within Parliament itself, my thinking is, given the election of the Formina MP, who is obviously an MPP person, but in Parliament is independent, and then we have the other Deputy Speaker also being Mr. Joseph, who is also an MPP person. So we have two strong MPP people, even if the Formina is officially independent. And then you have the Speaker who's NDC. I think Parliament itself, it seems to me, may have moved past this.
Okay.
But the remnant effect will still be there. In other words, the perception that there will be the expectation of revenge in some form, i.e., if you listen to the statement that you just read, clearly the Member of Parliament, in his opinion, the situation is not done. That they're expecting some vengeance, or they're expecting some vendetta from the NDC by reason of the speakership. And so there must be a way of countering that. I'm not sure if that is representative of the feelings of members of Parliament, but I think it's in the interest of the members of Parliament themselves, given the closeness of the numbers involved, to devise a working formula that will make Parliament the kind of body that is contemplated by the Constitution to ensure that the expected constitutional output is achieved. Because in the scheme of things, everybody will tell you, and it's my position actually as well, that of all the organs of government, the one that has failed to materialize or achieve its public purpose is Parliament. Even though members of Parliament continue to argue that there's a lot of back channel and a lot of behind the scenes work that goes on, which the rest of the public don't see, and there's no doubt about that. But in terms of the external accountability functions of Parliament, I think generally, even members of Parliament themselves lament the failure of Parliament to achieve that. This is a golden opportunity for Parliament to do that.
Mm. The people have a responsibility in moving beyond elections. They've given Parliament, for instance, 137 on both sides. Usually when we talk about changes, we are looking quickly to reforms. We've contributed to some kind of reform. What does this present to the entire nation? I'm not sure if I've asked the question right, but the people have certainly done something.
Yes, so I think the fact that you indicate that people have certainly done something indicates that we probably don't need much reforms, at least from the standpoint of constituency creations. The people of Ghana have shown voter maturity. And the people of Ghana, it seems to me, have spoken through their ballot in making a statement, i.e., that their voting pattern for presidents and for members of Parliament will not follow the same trend. So we may like the president, but we don't like the member of Parliament, or vice versa. We like the member of Parliament, but we may not like the president. It has always been the case of, uniform voting, i.e. you vote a particular party, both the president and the member of Parliament. But I think that what we have experienced clearly testifies to one thing, that the voters are becoming increasingly aware, and that awareness should be responded to by the political actors. Because the reality is, doing business as usual will invariably result in punishment at the polls. And I think we have just witnessed something close to that. So I am quite confident that in the circumstances of things, particularly in terms of parliamentary seating, I do not think, and sitting in terms of parliamentary representation, I do not think there's a need for any reform at this stage. Look, the truth of the matter is this. A lot of governance or government-related things are only perfected through experience. And the passages of law and incessant law reform actually deprive us of that opportunity of experience. And so when you bring a new law, that new law will now have to be perfected through a new experience. That new experience may come with certain costs. And invariably, there is no 100% perfect law. So you keep experimenting, and before the experiment matures through experience, you change the process, and that creates further problems and challenges. So I think there's a lot we have done, and there's a lot we should be proud for, there's a lot we can achieve, and there's a lot more we can do moving forward. But I think we should be slow by way of law reform as a means of achieving progress. Because progress is being made, but the true progress itself can only be achieved through commitment. And that's what the problem is. If political actors and constitutional actors are not committed, no law can be good enough. There's always a way of going around the law. In fact, the reality is that law is constantly behind human ingenuity. And so if you make a law in respect of which the actors are not committed, the actors would have devised ways of breaching the law and ways of overcoming the law before the law even comes into being. And by the time the law is passed, it's already dead on arrival. And it happens in many instances. So I think we've gotten to the level where commitment to the tenets of the law is the key watchword.
How do we achieve that? Because we, the people, have limitations. How do we get state actors to be committed?
Well, there are some things, unfortunately, that you can teach, and that's a regrettable thing. You know, commitment is one of the things that you can teach. So either people have the the innate tendency towards commitment, or they don't. How we achieve that, I concede that it's not exactly easy, but it's partly boils down to the kinds of people who we elect into office. It partly boils down to the commitment of leadership to ensure that followers are whipped into line. A lot of these things will have to be achieved by reason of our commitment to the law. And I'll give an example. If you take the Constitution itself as it stands, the Constitution contains a whole chapter on the ethics code of conduct for public officers. So it is not as if the Constitution is blind. The Constitution itself recognizes the fact that public officers must commit themselves to certain minimum standards of behavior while in office. Question, are we implementing even the code of ethics, the code of conduct of public officers? We most certainly are not. So if we begin implementing some of the rules, if we begin implementing or showing a certain if we begin showing a modicum of commitment to the rules of conduct, to the rules of ethics, to the rules against conflict of interest, to the rules avoiding corruption, there's so many things in there that if we begin implementing, we can realize certain gains. So ultimately it comes to commitment. And that's what I'm saying. If there is no commitment, there will be minimal gains. And as to how to achieve that, there are a variety of means of doing that, but certainly one of them will be in the area of us beginning to take, civic education much more seriously, us beginning to take parliamentary scrutiny much more seriously. Very soon the president will be making nominations for ministers. How Parliament goes through the vetting process and how Parliament confirms these ministers, they are all a testament and a function of how these people will behave when ultimately appointed. So a lot of the things we've taken as perfunctory, and that's part of the problem. We've taken a lot of these things as perfunctory. People get nominated and all kinds of things pop up out of them, but somehow they get approved. Over the years, there have been stories about nominees that some people expected that this one Parliament probably shouldn't confirm, but Parliament to confirm. Parliament has treated a lot of its work as perfunctory, and that is part of the problem. So we should begin looking at things more substantively. If Parliament begins to work more substantively in terms of how it treats its oversight functions, if the rules in the Constitution begins being implemented, if public officers start showing much more fidelity to their code of conduct, and all of us also get better educated on our civic responsibilities, I think there's a collective approach to this. I do not think that the passage of new laws really is a solution.
This lecture that your speaker on Monday, it's a One Ghana UPSA Law School, of which you're Dean, Joy FM, Joy News. What is this supposed to teach the people, tell the people? Who are you communicating with? Are you talking to authority? Are you talking to us, ordinary citizens?
Well, hopefully I'm talking to everyone. Again, it's partly my lamentations on things I hope and had hoped should have materialized since the Constitution came into force. So hopefully I'm talking to everyone. The sub-themes of the lecture is on citizenship, public goods, and inclusive governance. Now, when the president was first inaugurated in 2017, he charged Ghanaians to be citizens and not spectators. I took that to be a clarion call for the average Ghanaian to become a leader. I don't think that the president's expectations and hopes have been met. And I certainly am more distraught about the fact that we do have a lot of Ghanaians who become only active when it comes to elections. We have become, and that's part of the electoral fever, which is part of the worry. So citizenship is important. It is an important office. It's important for us to remember the responsibilities that are incumbent on us as citizens. And I think sometimes we tend to criticize, but there is collective failure when one does a reflection on things. So it's important or imperative that citizens become citizens, and not just the legal relationship. Citizenship from a legal standpoint is a relationship, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the civic citizenship. And then the second sub-theme is on public goods. Now, public goods are supposed to be the goods that are provided for the sustenance of life and liberty, in short, so to speak. And so from security to education, a number of things constitute public goods. And that is a governance component that, as I indicated, we don't seem to have any unanimity on anything. As a country, I think we are just so factionalized and divided on everything. And it's part of the reason I mentioned that once one election ends, another starts. We don't seem to ever have the space to breathe and to allow governance to be governance until the next election. So under public goods, I intend to look at the importance of governance, particularly from the standpoint of the provision of basic necessities, which, public goods is an economic concept, which illustrates the need for some of these basic public necessities for the functioning of life, limbs, and liberty. And then the last one being inclusive governance. I think that no Ghanaian is a stranger to the concept of the winner takes all. And I think that's part of the reason why our politics is so heated. There's our politics in Ghana have become a do and die business. And the reason for that is that there's a heightened cost to loss. Anytime anyone loses elections, essentially you've lost virtually everything for the next 4 years. So there's a sense of desperation and utter exasperation that if you do not win elections, you are essentially done. I think we've gotten to a point, after nearly 30 years of where we are, we should have gotten to a point where there's a recognition that at a certain level, you can have the key government being comprised of by members of a certain political party who obviously are forming the government. But if our entire society should change from the bottom to the very top, then that's where you have the heightened cost of loss, which invariably also then creates the desperation to fight for it until there's nothing more to lose. So the essence of the lecture is in short, is to look at these broadly and to share my humble reflections.
Okay. Would you also share experiences? Because, when it comes to being citizens, people get criticized a lot. You have survived it. Maybe you might want to look at sharing tips, because a lot of people also run away from sharing their opinions and being critical because of the backlash that sometimes, when you work in public service, sometimes you could possibly lose your job.
Correct. And I mean, by citizenship, I'm not asking anyone to go on radio and criticize people. I don't think, well, it's important for us to be active and vigilant. It's important for us to be participatory, and not to be, not to be on the window and, just basically not caring what's happening. But at the same time, I'm not asking that everyone should suddenly become a politician. So it's not political. I'm not asking for political, being an active partisan politician, so to speak. But it's imperative that we're active. It's imperative that we're interested. It's imperative that we participate. It's imperative that we cooperate. It's imperative that we play our role. It's imperative that when there's national service and there's call to duty, that we respond. There are basic things, and sometimes we tend to just have a bright line division or a black and white perception of things. Either you are in politics or you're out of everything. And I think the out of everything part, unfortunately, that's where the vast majority of people fall in. And it makes everybody else a spectator. To use the president's division at the time he was inaugurated in 2017, it makes everybody else a spectator and few citizens. And then we only really become citizens again when we have to go to the polls, just vote. And as I earlier indicated, I think we've gotten to a point in the life of our country where, as we approach 30 years of the 92 Constitution, we've gotten to that point where we have to become active citizens and not, young people who were born at the time, babies who were born in 1990 to 1993 are marriageable. And that should tell us something. That should tell us something. That should tell us that in terms of the transitions of life, young people who were born at the time the Constitution came into effect are beyond puberty. That should tell us. I'm just using this as a symbolic illustration of our maturity. And at that point, therefore, if we don't have an awful lot to show for it, it's a wobbling sign of failure. I don't think we failed. I don't think we've gotten to a point where we should be so worried about that. But there's so much we could have done, unfortunately, which we haven't done and which, therefore, we need to do.
Okay. So that's why I see that you're telling us don't concentrate or be pushing for reforms, as in for new laws, but we have to grow from what we have in the existing constitution that is there.
Correct. Our current constitution is not perfect, but it's far from being bad. And compared to many other countries, our constitution is actually a model. In fact, many countries have modeled or structured their constitution after ours, after we adopted it. Therefore, the problem really is not the constitution. The problem is the fidelity. The problem is the commitment. And if there's commitment, even loose laws can be perfected by practice. And by practice, the way it's been implemented or applied over the years will now become the understanding of the operation of the law. And many countries have done that, where laws that appear to have given one meaning have been perfected over time by a practical meaning that has been given to it by way of its operation. I think we've gotten there. Otherwise, you pass all kinds of laws, and the lack of commitment will lead the actors to find ways of undermining the law. And you will constantly be trying to play catch-up, i.e. a new law is needed to rectify or to deal with this new practical problem which has come out by reason of certain institutional misbehavior, and we are trying to redress that. There are a multiplicity of them, and Parliament simply cannot play catch-up. So because we can't play catch-up, I think we have to change the strategy. The strategy is no more hard law reform. The strategy should be institutional changes and attitudinal changes and commitment, and these are soft law in character.
You call these lamentations, Kofi Abochi's lamentations? No, they're not. We've just been talking about the Constitutional Day Lecture. Constitutional Day Lecture that's coming up on Monday, 11th of January, 2021. And the speaker is Dr. Ernest Kofi Abochi. I've been trying to tease out a few things from his lecture on Monday. Time is 9:30 a.m. West Wing UPSA Auditorium. Is everybody invited?
Yes, it's a public lecture.
Okay. 9:30 exactly, we're on air.
Well, I think Joy said that, if I understood, I think it was 10 o'clock.
Okay, so 9:30 is to get everybody seated. We're ready to go.
As we speak of citizenship, yes. Being on time is an essential factor of citizenship.
Okay.
So, yes, ideally, we should all be seated since it's a live program. The hope is that there shouldn't be much interruption. So, yes, okay. The earlier the seating, the better.
All right. Is this something that you'll be doing every year or this
yes.
year? Okay.
Yes, it is intended to be an annualized event where, in collaboration with Joy, we'll have a conversation on the Constitution, on different selected topics, giving different speakers from year to year.
Great. So this is the first.
Yes.
All right. So congratulations. I will be listening. We will all be listening, and it will be live on Joy News. It will be live on radio on Joy FM. It will be live on all our social media handles as well. Dr. Ernest Kofi Abochi, Dean, UPSA Faculty of Law. Thank you very much for being on the show this morning.
Thank you.
All right. Coming up next, we've got Show Business with Caddy. Stay with us.
Now, good morning. You're welcome to the Showbiz segment right here on the AM show. Now, after 20 years, award-winning background vocalist Nanama has decided to go solo. And in this interview with Joy News, she revealed that at some point in her life, she was discouraged by some radio presenters when she decided to be a solo musician. Now, she speaks more on that and on her new release, Konongo Kaya, 23 years later.
First hit that I did that everybody got to know Nanama was with Lord Kenya. Ododia Wakumem. Ododia Wakumem. Saudomia Bwewukwem. Ododia Wakumem. Saudomia Bwewukwem. Ododia Wakumem Timema. Obi in Sewadri. Then I did Novel and Kitia. Yes, Odoya. Odoya Odo. Oda muyedru, oda mentase. I did Philippa Befi. Mojana kasa, amamade meho. Mojana kasa, amameso masebino. At that time, I was doing works like back and forth all the time. I'm always in the studio every day working. And you hear a couple of your colleagues will be like, oh, you rush too much and all that. So, young girl growing up, you want to work, you know, you want to put food on the table. So I was like, okay, let me just do what everybody...
So you wanted recognition, exactly. But because of what people were saying?
Exactly. So, as I said, you were not courageous, and I was not courageous enough to stand on my feet and say, hey, I want this to happen. You are always being discouraged. You know, blacks are always like that. They want to... The fact that you are even young and you want to put certain things in place, they are like, oh, you rush too much. So I was just doing what everybody was doing. You go to the studio, you charge something small, then it was like fun. I was hoping to be recognized as a background vocalist, one, to do my own thing as a solo artist. I remember I recorded a couple of High Life songs, and some presenters would be like, can you challenge the men? Because no woman survives in the High Life terrain.
You actually released songs?
Yes, I have a couple of High Life songs, and I was like, why can't I be a High Life musician? I mean, that is me. So they were like, no. See, at a point I was like, okay, let me continue being a background vocalist, because I wasn't getting the push, and the discouragement was there.
You mentioned that you released a couple of songs, but you got discouraged by some radio presenters who were saying that you should continue. That pushed you to, ignore your songs and then continue singing at the background. But now you're coming solo.
Yes.
So tell us why you got discouraged at one point, and what has pushed you, what has encouraged you to come up and then sing on your own?
When I started this advocacy about background vocalists to be recognized, and a couple of bloggers and graphic showbiz people started writing stories about it, the comments that were coming were too much. You have the voice, why don't you do your own thing if they are not recognizing you? The comments were like, do your own thing. Enough is enough. Leave that background thing and do your own thing. So I said, okay. Because the more you hear fans behind you, those who have not even seen you before, saying these things, encouraging you, it means that people know your worth. So I was like, okay, let me just test the waters and see if it's going to work. And it has worked.
So tell us about your new release. Tell us more about it.
My new release is going on well. I released it on the 18th of last month. And I remember when even it wasn't out yet, radio presenters were eager to play. Jerry Forson was like, Nana, I'm not waiting for that 18th. I want to start playing it on Adom FM. So it was nice working with Roland Roro, who produced the song, and then my manager writing it for me and all that. I didn't know it would work well like this, but I think the presenters were tired of me. You know, enough is enough. Yeah. We are tired of Nanama. I remember at one point, Master Richard would be like, you don't call me if you're not out with your own song.
Yeah, what's the title of the song, and what's the story behind it? What's the story behind this new release after so many years?
Konongo Kaya. I had no idea my manager was writing songs like lyrically it was like that. But I remember last week I was talking to him. I was like, why those words? Why those lyrics? He said, no, I took a couple of them from your life. And then, because it's been ups and downs, but I've moved on. So I think that is where the story about that song is about me personally, because that is what he told me, that he intentionally wrote a song personally about my life. And looking at it, yes, it speaks about me. So it's about you not appreciating what you have, but then you also not let a person go, because I said, we need, that kind of thing. Yeah. So that is how the song is, and it's a nice storyline.
So that was background vocalist Nanama on her decision to go solo after 23 years in the music industry. And there's more showbiz at midday with Becky. Don't miss out on that. My name is Kadi. Amavi.
Yes, Kadi, thank you very much, Kadi, for show business this morning. And really, that will be it for the AM show this Friday. Thank you so much for your company.